Patricia Gardner of Archer Memorial Amy Zion Church and chair of the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration here in Windsor. While we've been able to come together as a community in person to celebrate the dream, life, and legacy of Dr. King for over 30 years, this year is a little different. Therefore, we present this video as our annual program, still in honor of Dr. King. We will be sharing and reflecting on many special moments from previous programs. We also are very pleased that we will have a dynamic keynote speaker for this year, who we will be introducing later in this program. Now, the pastor of Archer Memorial Amy Zion Church, Reverend William Campbell, and First Lady Reverend Frances Campbell would like to welcome you.
Welcome to our celebration of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It's an annual celebration that we have hosted by the Archer Memorial African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. We are grateful that you have joined us and stay committed to being a support in this meeting every year. My name is Reverend William L. Campbell. I'm the pastor of Archer Memorial, and this is
the Reverend First Lady Frances Campbell.
And together we want to thank you for being a part of this celebration, because without you, this celebration won't have as much meaning. Thank you. We pray that you receive some food for thought, some inspiration and encouragement as you listen and go through our service.
Thank you, Pastor and Reverend First Lady Campbell, for that warm welcome. Each year, we open our program with a prayer from our community clergy.
Heavenly Father, we come together this day to celebrate the life of a man who always preached the dignity of every human person. We gather today to continue that prayer. For Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. knew to the very core of his being that until we recognize that each and every person is made in the image and likeness of God, we fail to live out God's will here on earth. For each and every one of us is unique, is precious, is unrepeatable. Help us, Lord, to realize this. Help us to be leaders in our community as Dr. King was. Help us, Lord, to be instruments that help humanity shine, to promote a culture where all are valued, all have dignity, all are equal, all are loved. For all things are possible with God. All dreams can come true. And we ask this in God's name. Amen.
Amen. We continue to have participation from our state and local officials, which is a very important part of the celebration. And it's very nice to have them come together with the community and commemorate Dr. King together. Lift Every Voice and Sing is also known as the Black National Anthem and was written as a poem by James Weldon Johnson, an NAACP leader and civil rights activist. The lyrics are very powerful and speak to the struggle, yet also speak to hope for a better day.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let every sound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rise
each year we have community church choirs and groups come to sing a few selections, which is always a very special part of this event.
I am grateful for the things that you have done. Yes, I'm grateful for the victories we've won. I could go on and on and on about your words, because I'm grateful, grateful, so grateful just to praise you, Lord. Flowing from my heart are the issues of my heart. It's gratefulness. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me on. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, bring relief. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me on.
We have had some incredible theatrical performers who have come in their own way to pay tribute to Dr. King.
I stand before you, saying me too. I stand before you, saying, time's up. I stand before you, screaming Black Lives Matter. I stand before you, screaming all lives matter. I stand before you saying, what happened to the dream? See, it doesn't make sense to me that today in 2018, we have to be reminded of all these things. Because I remember that there was once a dream. So I stand today asking, where are the dream seekers? Where are the people who remember that on April 4th, 1968 at approximately 6 o'clock in the evening, when one was just approaching time to go have dinner, he said he just wanted to freshen up. He stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel and looked out, probably contemplating what his next move was, probably thinking, what was he gonna eat? And a shot rang out. A shot that was set to kill the dream. It pierced his jaw, struck his spinal cord, and killed him. It killed the man, but not the dream.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Garlene Dumont, and I'm an attorney in Hartford, Connecticut. It is my pleasure to be here with you today as we reflect on a wonderful man who has left quite a legacy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I had the pleasure of participating in the Martin Luther King Day Celebration hosted by the Archer Memorial AME Zion Church back in 2016. I had the task of speaking about the Freedom Riders, and I wanted to briefly discuss with you today how I believe Dr. King's legacy continues on today. Advocacy may have changed because of the times we are in, but the fight continues, and that is the message I have for you today. The work continues. We're able to do so much more now because of social media, because of the internet, that brings us closer to one another, even if we're in different cities, different states, and even in different countries. Dr. Martin Luther King, I believe, would be surprised to know that we continue to revere him for all of the work that he had done. I don't think that's what he set out to do back in the 60s. The people living during the Civil Rights Movement knew that history was being made. Just as now, history is being made. It is up to each and every one of us to decide which side of history we wish to be on, the activist side or the pacifist side. Do what you can when you can, so that you will always be on the right side of history. Moving forward, Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy continues only if we allow it to, and we make sure that it does. Let's use this opportunity, even through this pandemic that we are living through now, to continue his legacy, to continue to do the work, to continue to raise up the next generation of freedom riders, of civil rights activists, and of leaders of our community. I hope all of you have a wonderful day as you reflect on your own on Dr. King's legacy.
Our young people are just amazing. It is such a significant part of our program, giving them the opportunity to express their views and have their voices heard. Two families will share what they experienced having their children participate in the past, and then we will have some highlights of previous youth reflections.
Hi, my name is Jordan Roach. My letter to Martin Luther King 2 years ago was a chance to participate in something of importance alongside some of my peers. I was able to participate in honoring Martin Luther King at the Town Hall celebration in 2019. I felt proud to be able to use my writing skills to bring the words of Martin Luther King forward to new generations so me and my community could reflect on his teachings.
And my name's Lori Roach, and I'm Jordan's mom. And it was a great experience as a parent to see your child participate in something that's so important and that's also bigger than himself. So connecting to the greater good for everyone as opposed to just thinking about themselves. It's a really great step in growing up, and it was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Helga Finley, and my children Morgan and James had the opportunity to participate in the Windsor Martin Luther King Day program. As both an educator and a parent of Windsor, it was very moving to see my children and other members of the community reflect upon Dr. King's dream.
Martin Luther took a leap of faith when no one else was willing to. He never backed down, and no matter how hard things got, he believed things would change. If you believe in something, that's all it takes to make a change. Today, if you look around, everyone has goals and ambitions, but most people aren't willing to work for them. They say one thing and do the other. Dr. King rose to the challenge and never looked back. If you see something you don't like, stop it. If you lose something, find it. And if you want something, fight for it. Dr. King was a remarkable man who stopped at nothing until he achieved what he wanted, which was equality between all humans no matter their color.
Dr. King was also a good fighter, but he did not use his hands or weapons. Dr. King believed that nonviolent protest was the most effective weapon against racism and unjust in society. By being focused and disciplined, he was able to coordinate the most powerful and peaceful protest the world has ever known. Dr. King's legacy leaves us so many memories to learn from, so many lessons to learn from. But the biggest fight that I hope you all learn from is to always fight the good fight. Thank you.
His dream is not about forgetting the past, because to forget means to fail to remember the mass genocide inflicted upon African Americans that initiated so many racial issues in America today. To forget means to have not learned from our mistakes. It's not about our country. This is about our country's next step. It's about how do we recover from such a shameful past. It's about how do we learn from our country's faults and teach others not to follow in our steps. It means exposing injustice such as police brutality and the mass incarceration of Black people. It means ending systematic oppression now. It means Black Lives Matter too. Now on the outside, we may not all look the same, but we're still a part of the same race, the human race. Dr. King's dream was only the start of the marathon. Now it's our job to finish it and to end it off strong. It's our time to make these dreams a reality. Now is our time to make America really great.
However, I have to wonder, would Martin Luther King Jr. be happy with what is happening today in the United States? I think Martin Luther King Jr. would be happy with the nonviolent protests for Black Lives Matter, but he would not be happy with the violence during some of those protests. He would not be happy with the violence, homelessness, drug crisis, and sex trafficking that is happening all over this country. Martin Luther King Jr. would be happy that the women in every industry, not just Hollywood, are standing up against sexual harassment, and some men are standing up with them. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. But as far for every man, woman, and child being treated as equals, this country, this state, and this town, we have some work to do.
We have had some really awesome keynote speakers in the past. Some have been local educators, some community leaders. As with our youth speakers, our keynote speakers shared messages that were mind-provoking and relatable to the challenges that we still face in our society today.
You see, to know and understand your challenges is the first step in working towards overcoming them. The quality, not the longevity of one's life, is what's important. Because for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, but he loses his soul? I'm here to tell you that belief in yourself and your dream is enough. You are enough. No one has the right to impose their doubts, their fears, or their negativity on your experience.
So when we think about our experience in the United States, we have been programmed with a lot of alternative facts which have shaped our imagining. Some of us think that we're better than we might be, and some of us think we're worse than we actually are. It's because we have been mismanaged in our minds. And so when it comes to dismantling institutional cruelty with love, we have to unpack some of the things that happened in this nation as we created this nation. When the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock and started the colonies in this place, we recognized they moved into somebody else's house. They were not invited, but they just got on their boats and rolled on in and then took over somebody else's house. And then as a part of our programming, we get upset that the people whose houses they took over got upset. We have been programmed with alternative facts. People lived lives of slaves. Did anybody sign up for that? No. Was it nice? No. It was institutional cruelty. People were battered, people were beaten, people were disrespected, and that is the foundation of our nation. Institutional cruelty. And don't get me talking about the women, how we've been treated over the years, and some of the other groups of people that have been treated in disrespectful ways. And over time, we created institutions that supported this way of being, even as we see it reflected through public education. And so then along came Martin Luther King, a minister and an activist who dared to speak up and say what everybody else was really thinking, but it's just that people have a way of going along with the program. So here we are, people that are vessels of love in this place. Remember these words of Martin Luther King. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Let us dismantle institutional cruelty.
We are so excited to have a phenomenal keynote speaker this year, Mr. Byron Washington. Mr. Washington is a native of Windsor and is a graduate of Windsor High School. He currently works as a federal contractor and in the past worked extensively in Washington, D.C. as a consultant serving various U.S. federal agencies. Prior to his work in D.C., he was an independent consultant providing services to nonprofit, private, community organizations, and educational institutions. His areas of expertise include leadership development and training, change management, risk analytics, cultural competency, and organizational transformation. Mr. Washington has lived abroad in Singapore, China, and Nigeria, and has served as a guest presenter and consultant internationally. He holds a master's degree in public affairs with a concentration in international relations from Princeton University and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Winston-Salem State University. After this selection sung by the McMahon family, Mr. Washington will give the keynote address.
Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let your love increase. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Walls of pride and prejudice shall cease. When we are your instruments of
Where there is hatred, we will sow his love. Where there is injury, we will never judge. Where there is strife, we will speak his peace to the people crying for relief. We will be your instruments of peace.
First, let me extend thanks to the MLK committee and those involved in putting together this virtual event. As an individual who grew up in Windsor, Connecticut and graduated from Windsor High School, it is a privilege and an honor to be able to share with you in this virtual space. For the time allotted, I want us to consider this thought: dream ahead, proceed with caution. Dream ahead, proceed with caution. It's this idea that you can continue to go forward, but you have to be alert and know that the path that you're headed on, you may encounter some things. You may run into some roadblocks, might hit some potholes, but you can continue to go forward to achieve the dream that we'll talk about as it relates to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This dream is still ahead of us. This dream is still down the road. However, there are some steps that must be taken in order for us to achieve that dream. So let's quickly look at Three things: perspective, posture, and push. Perspective, posture, and push. The first is perspective. When we listen to Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, there's something very profound in the fact that he gives us a very clear perspective on where the African American was at that time. He talks about this check that was given that was coming back insufficient funds, and having the right vantage point or the right perspective is key in dealing with any situation or any problem. Consider a person who has a car and the car is not starting, the car is not working, and the person spends all day outside the car, under the hood, walking around, checking the tires, checking the spark plugs, but does not take the time to look at the instrument display inside the car. They will continually miss out on the fact that the car simply needs gas. There's nothing else wrong with the car except it needs gas. It's the perspective that's wrong, and therefore it renders them to spend all day trying to find a problem that has an easy solution if they're looking in the right place. And I think that's indicative of where we are, honestly, in our society and in our community. It depends on how we're looking at situations. How we choose to view them will tell us or help us to better solve them. If we choose to ignore the situation, if we choose to try to change the vantage point, if we choose to try to approach this any other way, you'll end up with the wrong solution and or ask the wrong questions, therefore getting the wrong answers. Perspective is key, and I think the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was giving everyone this idea that if you have the wrong perspective, if you don't see this clearly, you will not be able to deal with the issues and the concerns and the plights of the African American that they're dealing with at that time. And also, if we think about our current society, the plight that's being dealt with by African Americans and marginalized groups here within the United States. So perspective is key. The next thing we want to handle is posture. Posture can be position, but posture is also somebody's attitude. And if you don't have the right perspective and the right posture, you will never be able to move this dream forward. Dream ahead is great to encourage people. It's great to tell people this is possible, this is attainable. But if you do not have the right posture, the right attitude, you will never be able to get to this dream. And this is indicative of the United States of America. This is indicative of our own communities, of our states. If people don't have the right posture to say, oh, I see what you mean. Oh, yeah, that is a terrible situation. Yes, that is a marginalized space. Yes, that is an underserved population. To say that you see it, but then have a posture to ignore it, or to have a posture that doesn't do anything to actually address the problem, does nothing for anybody. To have the right vantage point, per se, to have the right perspective, and then to do nothing or to have indifference in your posture is a terrible combination to have. If we are going to proceed with caution ahead to get to this dream, if we're going to move the needle forward, we have to have the right perspective and the right posture. Wrong perspective or having a wrong posture will ultimately bankrupt us in what we're doing. It'll stagnate us and keep us from going forward. Right perspective and right posture. Lastly, this idea of push. And I think Dr. Martin Luther King was very focused in how he dealt with push. But let me add this really quickly. When we talk about posture and we talk about perspective, if people don't understand from a perspective standpoint and a posture standpoint that what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was bringing to the table was something that was beneficial to all of us. This was not something that was solely going to help African Americans, but he often talks about how our destinies are intertwined, that the communities within the United States were all linked together. And if African Americans are able to achieve certain goals, or African Americans are able to operate in a particular way in our communities, that is a benefit, that is a win-win for all of us. And this is seen even now in empirical data when we begin to look at diversity in organizations, diversity in business. There is a value add when you have people of different thoughts, different ideas, different backgrounds, different races. So Dr. Martin Luther King's dream, his vision, his speech wasn't singular. It wasn't myopic. It was really saying, hey, we can all get something out of this. If you allow African Americans to cash this check, if you allow African Americans to actually gain these rights that they're supposed to have and should have, that's actually a win-win to the United States. It's a win-win to us all. And let me give you this, and I'm going to be done. the best place to look at when you look at this benefit of unity is the United States at, I'll use the Summer Olympics. When you look at the United States and their medal count, not just the medal count, but the medals they achieve at any Summer Olympics, when you compare it to other countries, there's a difference. One thing that you see that's starkly different is that we tend to get medals in a plethora of events, whereas most countries focus on one specific space or one specific area. Due to the diversity of our terrain in the United States, of the people, of the experiences, of the interests, we get medals in all sorts of things. Everything from equestrian to karate to shooting to gymnastics to diving to rowing. We get across the board, and that is indicative of the great diversity that we have here and the benefit that it is to everyone. And imagine if we took that same Olympic mentality and brought it to our communities, brought it to our classrooms, brought it to our businesses, brought it out into the broader space and not just isolated it into that. Imagine the value add that we could achieve with that. And finally, as I close, this idea of push. One thing that Dr. Martin Luther King showed us is that it will take effort and it will take activity to go there. And what he did say was that this idea of how we push and go forward, he didn't want it to be lawless. He didn't want it to be something that was illicit in nature, but that we should go through the right channels and the right pipelines in order to rectify and address the inefficiencies that African Americans were facing. Consider this, the American writer E.E. Cummings said this. He said, "It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are." Or consider this, the Reverend Benjamin E. Mays, who was the spiritual mentor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Mays was the president of Morehouse College, and he suggested at one point that there's a crown above your head, something that you must grow into, something that you must grow up to. And this idea that to not have a dream is a sin and a crime. And so all of these things are indicative of what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was presenting to us, that all of these things should happen. There is progress, there is growth, these things need to occur, but we are going to have to push. We're going to have to push. So in closing, as we think about our perspective, as we think about our posture, and this idea that we push, the New Testament writer, the Apostle Paul, suggests that we ought to press, and that is to go against resistance. So if we're going to achieve this dream, we need to proceed with caution. We need to have the right perspective, have the right posture, and most of all know that it's going to take effort, collective effort, for us to be able to reach that dream. Thank you guys again. Best to you. Please continue to stay safe during this time. And again, thank you again for this opportunity to share at this Martin Luther King Jr. virtual event.
Now, what does all this mean in this great period of history? It means that we have got to stay together. It means that we have got to stay together and maintain unity. You know, whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a favorite formula for doing it. What was it? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves. But whenever the slaves get together, something happens in Pharaoh's court, and he cannot hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now, let us maintain unity. The question is not, if I stop and help this man in need, what will happen to me? If I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That is the question. Let us rise up tonight with greater readiness. Let us stand with greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. Well, I don't know what will happen now.
Well,
We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter to me now. Because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I am not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land.
Yes, sir.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. And I am happy tonight. I am not worried about anything. I am not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.